My name is Julia Neal Sykes. I was born October 15th, 1923. Testing, testing.
From Point of Rock Studios, welcome to 90 over 90. It's indeed my pleasure to interview and speak with Julia Neal Sykes. Julia was born on a tenant farm in southern Mecklenburg County near the Bustavoy Bridge. She was married to the former Reverend R.B. Sykes for 30 years. She is the mother of one, Dr. James Neal, proud grandmother of two, and great-grandmother of one. Julia is retired from a long and dedicated career in the public schools of over 33 years. She is the author of 4 books, including Healing Thoughts, a book of poems highlighting her deeply held faith and life journey from her childhood on a tenant farm to a successful career as a school teacher. She also is a co-author of Footprints on the Rough Side of the Mountain, which is a history of African Americans in Belmont, North Carolina. She still to this day is a regular teacher, Sunday school teacher at St. Stephen's AME Zion Church. Julia, thank you for coming to 90 over 90. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I'm so glad to have you here. I've enjoyed talking to you about your life, and I'm hoping that we can share that with some folks who know you and some that don't. And some folks who don't know you can get to know you a little better. I mentioned in the introduction that you were born in southern Mecklenburg County on a tenant farm. What are some of your earliest memories about life on that farm and what it was like growing up in the 20s?
Well, according to what life is today, I look back on that as being a peaceful existence. Being born on that farm, I have many cherished memories. Even today, I dream about going back there or being there because it was a time of freedom. Our parents, who were so devoted, seemed to just bring us together. Working on that farm, we were free. The farm belonged to Ben Weathers, as I can remember. And I remember the big house that they lived in on the hill, and our house was not too far from that. But we were free to live off the land. I mean, we grew cotton, corn, and that was for the owner of the farm as far as the cotton was concerned. But there were orchards of fruit trees, apples, pears, and peaches that we could live off the land.
Now you had there were 8 total children, is that correct?
8 total children, and all of us grew up there. But I just remember the togetherness that we felt. It was so beautiful, and living on the banks of the Catawba River, that was a beautiful thing. I mean, I can just like hear the birds up in the woods as we sat on the banks of the Catawba River and fish with the fishing pole and the hook and the line. But my dad made baskets out of white oak strips that he used to put in the water. He made it so there was a little open door that the fish could go in, but they couldn't come out.
So it was like kind of like a lobster trap, I guess.
Yeah, and the next morning, a basket full of fish, especially catfish. So there we had catfish. We had fish. He raised hogs, and of course, we grew everything. And my mom was so industrious. She canned the fruits for the winter time. I mean, she canned everything. I mean, the hogs was slaughtered and we made sausage. She even canned that. And I just remember we just had food.
Oh, this is during, obviously, the Depression as
Leading
well.
up, it was leading up to the Depression. Of course, we didn't know what was going on. It was just a joyful time. And I remember weekends, my dad had the best recipe for homemade ice cream. I mean, we all would sit around and eat this ice cream after you put it in the churn, and
Hmm.
put ice and salt on that and keep turning. The kids took turns turning the freezer until it, and then we sat there and we just had an ice cream feast.
Feast.
Yeah, that was Saturday night. Sunday mornings, we sat around the table and had family prayer. And then we go to church across the Buster Boyd Bridge. Sometimes we went on the wagon. We put boards on the wagon bed and would ride across there to that little church called Raymond A.M. Zion Church.
And when you said you had family prayer, what did that mean? What does that mean?
We said Bible verses and my dad prayed. Or that was the time that we got this foundation that this is what we do before we go out. This is what we do to stay in touch with each other and with the Lord.
Well, did you have time? It sounds like you had time for fun. Were you also part of the workforce? Did you have to work on the farm?
Yeah, as soon as we got old enough to put a burlap bag on our shoulders to pick the cotton, that's what we use. You drag this bag up and down the row until it get full, and then you would take it to the end of the row and dump it on a big sheet. At the end of the day, you'd fold that up and put it on the wagon. That was the good part. Then we'd get up on the wagon and ride back to the barn.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing would happen the next day until we picked the cotton. But that's just the end of it. We had to hoe the cotton in the spring. That's like thinning it out so that it will grow right.
Mm-hmm.
My dad used to fuss with me because I would dig up too much of it,
Right.
and of course, that meant less cotton. But then you'd see those big yellow blossoms, and then soon you would see the bowl. And that bowl would open up late fall, and there that fluffy cotton. Now that was a good time because, I don't know, even seemingly hard work, we were still together. All the children would be out there, and sometimes we'd just pause and have a little good time, maybe rolling around in the cotton or whatever. But those were joyful times.
You have good memories of
I
them.
have good memories of that because after that it was the togetherness that was a good thing.
Now you have not mentioned education. You went to school. You went to grade school.
Yeah.
But I want to touch on that now because you said that you knew from an early, or you told me that you knew from an early time that you wanted to be a teacher. And I'm wondering if that's something that was suggested to you by your parents, or how did that, where did that come from?
I don't know exactly. Maybe it was when I first started to school, I hated it. I didn't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my older sister I would be crying walking across the field. We had to walk to this little 3-room school up on Shopton Road. And I didn't want to leave the house. But once I got there and found out it was a joy to learn, it was very good. It was something that motivated me. We had 3 teachers, and their devotion to these kids, to all of us, inspired me that this is something I need to do. I need to learn, and I think I want to become more involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it just started growing that, yeah, I think I want to be a teacher. So then, you know, I told you how I made my little classroom and put me some
Pretend
stones
classroom.
down in my little pretend classroom and put stones down there and put sticks on the stones. And these were my students. And I had a good time doing that, just teaching them.
Well, you've written about some of your play memories when you were on that farm in your book, Healing Thoughts. I brought 3 of your books. The one I want to refer to right now is your poetry book, Healing Thoughts, and you wrote a little poem about your childhood fantasy, as you put it. And I was wondering if you would be kind enough to, it's a short poem, but I think it maybe talks a little bit about your memories of wanting to be a teacher in the early time, and I'm wondering if you would read that for me, would you?
Be glad to. I'll have to take it slow because my vision is sort of...
That's all right.
Okay.
Slow is fine.
The title of the poem is Childhood Fantasy Come True. When I was just a little girl, I'd lose myself in a fantasy world. I pretended I was teaching school, all the lessons and enforcing each rule. I made my classroom enclosed with rocks. My students were sticks on little blocks. For hours I would instruct and teach, earnestly giving special help to each. I proudly hung on to that fantasy, and finally my dream became a reality. I became a teacher with real kids to teach. Through many trials, my goal I was determined to reach. When the day came and I stood before my class, I breathed a prayer of thanks. I was there at last. There sat 30 real kids with smiling faces and 30 real seats, all in their places. So my advice to anyone who has a childhood dream, hold on to it for dear life, no matter how hard it seems. Work hard, persevere, and it will happen to you. Your childhood fantasy surely can come true.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Now, you left your farm in southern Mecklenburg County and moved to Belmont.
Not before we moved to another place. That was the beginning of the Great Depression. Before we left Mecklenburg County, we moved to another farm in the Steel Creek area, on the Brown farm. Everything changed. We no longer had access to garden space. There were fruit trees, but we couldn't bother the orchard. There were gardens and everything, but not available to us. Frankly, that was the first time I remember really being hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Because we just didn't have the land to grow the crops that we had been accustomed to on the Weathers farm. There are 2 things that stick out in my mind about that place. We had to go up to their house. There was the lady and her son, as I can remember, were the ones who owned this farm. An elderly lady and her son. I don't know what he did, what else he did or whatnot. But anyway, we had to go to that house to get water from the well. And my mom always told us, don't bother anything. Just go get the water and come back. But that day, the apple tree right near the well was loaded with those golden apples. And I just thought, if I sneak over there and just get a few, maybe I can escape without being caught, and Mom would never know what happened. And I crawled under that tree on my knees, and when I pulled on the limb, I lost my balance and fell down in a splinter from a broken bush under there, went all the way through that part of my hand. Oh, what pain I felt. Now, I mean, I threw the apples down. I got the water, went back home. Of course, my mom, what happened to you? I was in tears. I couldn't lie. I had to tell her what I had done. So she fussed with me. I told you not to bother anything up there. Well, Mom, the apples were so beautiful. I mean, I just thought if I got 1 or 2 apples, they wouldn't miss it. But I learned my lesson. Listen to what your mom tells you. I mean, she tried to get the splinters out, but it was just so painful. So she used one of her old remedies. She put some fat meat on top of this place where the splinter was, and tied it up and made me keep it on there overnight. And the next morning when she pushed on it, all that came out. So that was a lesson learned. Don't do things when your mom tells you not to.
Moms are usually right, aren't they?
Yeah. And then the next thing that I remember, there was a big walnut tree in the front yard where the big house was. We call that the big house. My baby sister decided to go and pick up some walnuts, and we had been accustomed to just hulling the walnuts and put them out and let them dry. And in the winter when you crack them, that's a good meat in there, good nuts to eat. So she picked them up, and the old lady came to the door and told her, "You can hold those 1/2 of the other." My little sister didn't even look back at her. She dropped those walnuts on the ground and never looked back. And I said, "You go, girl. You don't have to do this." And I remember those 2 incidents very well, because that was a place where I really felt like we just couldn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was after that we moved to Gaston County.
Right. Now, you were a good student, and you early on knew that you wanted to go to college.
Yeah.
And were you near the top of your class?
I was always in the top 10.
You were?
Yeah.
What drove you? What drove you to want to? You said you wanted to be a teacher. What do you think it was that got you off the farm and into the profession of teaching?
Well, as we got older now, when we came to Gaston County, that was another letdown. I mean, when my father came over to look at the farm, I don't think he looked at the house. He just was looking the land that he was going to till.
Mm-hmm.
And when we loaded everything out on a wagon and came to Gaston County, we moved to the Gaston farm in North Belmont.
Right.
When we drove up on this wagon, there we saw this little log cabin. Really, the little house on the prairie. It was that. I think the Gastons had
It was the Gaston farm.
Yeah.
Harley Gaston's father.
Yeah. I think what happened, I think I learned that from Henry, that his father had tried to grow tobacco, and it was really a tobacco barn. It was a log cabin.
That you were living in.
Yeah. They had built a few rooms on, extra rooms onto that building. It was a 2-story building, and of course, tobacco doesn't grow in this area. I learned that when I went down east. But the little place was filthy. There were bed bugs. And we all just said, no way, no way, we can't do this. One of my brothers said, I'm leaving, and he did. He did, I can't say. But my dad that was the first time I saw my father cry.
Because of the conditions that you were going
That he had put us in this position, you know. And, well, we all had our little cry, and
Got over
then he got over it. We had to, this thing, you know, stick together.
Uh-huh.
And so that's what we did. But my dad had been the kind of creative person that he was. He said, we'll work on it. And how he tried to improve that house. I mean, leading up to that upstairs room was just like going up on a ladder,
Mm-hmm.
not a stairway. But he fixed it so it was a stairway. And needless to say, and I think about how that could have been a real fire hazard. He covered the exposed logs with newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
He used a batter and made it look. We thought
Finished.
It was okay. Yeah, it was
Right.
finished, and he made a stairway leading up. And of course, we did stay there for quite a long time. We grew cotton, corn, sugar cane, and sweet potatoes. Yeah, I remember when the time came to harvest sweet potatoes. I was loving school then. We had to stay out of school to harvest the sweet potatoes. And I always would pick up a potato and drop a tear. Pick up a potato and
You
drop
wanted
a
to be
tear.
in school.
Because I wanted to be in school. But there were so many instances where we had to take the time out to work on the farm.
Right.
And finally we left that farm and moved to the Sloan Springs farm, not too far from that.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't stay there too long because things were getting no better, and my dad decided maybe this is it.
Mm-hmm. Get out of the farming business.
Yeah, and I was glad, but he had looked at a house that was being built down near the school on Todd Street where we finally ended up. But it was not ready at the time, and Mr. Springs had said he wanted his house for another tenant farmer. So we found a little place in Mount Holly that all of us went there and stayed about 2 months. That's when we finally moved to Belmont, downtown Belmont.
Now you got ready to go to college. Did you go to 11th grades or 12?
At that time, high school was 11th.
Right. I think
11th grade.
I thought that, and you had a little mini crisis you had to deal with.
I did.
Don't you tell us about that if you'd like?
Well, when I graduated, I was also pregnant. And that was a turning point in my life. This is the end of the dream that I had had.
Mm-hmm.
But back in my mind, after 11 months, I just figured, well, I just take my little baby and I will go and sit on the porch or the steps of a college somewhere. Somebody will help me.
You felt like that was going to keep you from going to school.
Yes, what else? I just felt like this is it. Well, afterwards, the principal encouraged me. He said, you are a good student. You need to go back to school. If you do that, a job will be waiting for you. I was naive enough to think, okay. That helped me make that greatest sacrifice to go away and leave my baby with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Because I said, for 4 years, I'll be back before he enters school. But when I graduated
From college.
from college, and that was the hardest thing to face my parents, to say, I went to my dad first, and I told him, if you and Mama Neal would keep my baby, I'd like to go back. And the only thing he said was, we will talk to Mama Neal.
Your mother.
Right. They were called Mama and Papa Neal. Everybody called them Mama and Papa Neal. And I was just so afraid. Mom's not going to go along with this. But it was agreed that they would take care. And I felt surely when I put my baby in her arms, he was in good hands.
He was.
He was.
Now you went on to Fayetteville State.
Went on, and that
did you come
was
back and forth?
as often as I could, which was very little with traveling conditions at that time.
You had to ride the train
I had
or
to
bus?
ride the bus, and it was during World War II.
And so the bus
And
was...
so that was
lot of
a big
soldiers?
problem. Yes, a lot of soldiers on the bus, and the situation of having to go to the back of the bus.
As an African American, when you ride the bus to Fayetteville, you would have to sit in the back.
It's had to sit in the back. Only the two last seats. If they were full, I told you I learned how to sleep standing up on the bus.
So you'd have to stand.
Have to stand until somebody got off, and
Even if there were vacant seats in the front.
even if there were vacant seats in the front. And I remember one time that the bus was just full. There were no vacant seats anywhere, and I had to wait for another bus. When I got to Fayetteville, it was after midnight. We had a curfew, be in the dorm before 12. And when I got to Fayetteville, I just had a ticket. I didn't have cab fare. I remember taking my little suitcase and walking down the railroad track after midnight, because the railroad track went right behind my dormitory. And when I got to the door, there the matron stood and told me, you are late getting in, so you're going to be campused. Campus meant that you couldn't leave the campus. You couldn't go to town. You couldn't go cross the street to the store. That didn't matter to me. I didn't have money to be going to town anyway, or across the street to buy snacks or whatever. So, okay, that was fine. But luckily, I sang in the college choir, and the director, you did not mess with his choir members. So the members, the choir was going to, I think, to Elizabeth City and Virginia, or another college or something. We were going on a trip. So he just told the matron, you don't mess with my choir members. So
You got to go.
I got to go on the trip. But, thinking about all that behind me, and it took determination and just...
as my grandfather used to say, main strength and awkwardness.
Well, whatever, I went through a lot of that. And of course, when I first got to Fayetteville, as I looked back, I didn't have enough money to register because there were some fees. I went in at the second quarter, and there were some fees that was supposed to have been paid the first quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know that, and I didn't have that money. But I remember going in to see the president, and he was looking at me through these thick lens glasses, and I'm just thinking he's going to tell me to get the bus and get out of here. But he was so kind until I could get the rest of my money, and he asked me all about, he knew somebody in Belmont, and he just made me feel comfortable sitting there talking with me. So,
Well, you graduated. You got a job. You became a teacher, I think, mostly in the eastern part of the state. you, I guess, began to raise your son, James. Is that correct?
No, he stayed with his grandparents.
He did. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that and you they continue to raise him, and you taught?
Yeah, and I would always be coming back. I was coming back because at the time I was not married.
Uh-huh.
So it was just like coming back home to be with him or be with the family. But it's a funny thing. We always said that Mama Neal has this thing about grandchildren. And through, I think she had a daycare for all the grandchildren. Once they check in, they don't check out. She just loved to have them around. And of course, by me not having settled down into one place, it was, I didn't want to uproot him.
Right.
But you know, the greatest regret that I have about that, and I might be wise enough to say, or it was no fault of mine that at that time that single mothers were treated that way. You had to go in exile, no matter how much good that you might be doing for society.
Mm-hmm.
That they just didn't look at you like they do now.
Right.
And I had, as I said before, I had to live in exile.
Well, for a while, and then you met Reverend R.B. Sykes and got married.
Yeah, well, at that time, everybody was a little set in their ways. I still didn't want to uproot him. And, of course, he was stuck in this situation. And I don't know how I had this talk, especially with my father. He was brought up with a step-parent. He had to endure 2 sets of children. And when my dad tells me something, I listen. And when I finally got married, he told me we just need to keep him away from that. Because what he had to endure, it may not have happened that way, but I don't know. Maybe I should have stood my ground and said no. But when I looked back and started thinking, they gave me this opportunity. How can I say, I'm done with you now, I'm taking him with me.
Right. Well, I think I want to talk a little bit now, and I don't want to bring you fast forward too much, but I mentioned in the introduction that you had written a number of books. You've already read from Healing Thoughts. And I brought a few of them here with me. Another book that kind of chronicles some of the things we've talked about today, as well as some of your poetry, is Sorrow Like a Mother Bird. And then the other one I mentioned in the intro is Footprints on the Rough Side of the Mountain, which you wrote with Oscar DePriest Hand Sr., which chronicles some of the history of African Americans in Belmont, in Gaston County, but mainly Belmont. And this book has been distributed all over the world. Is it available on Amazon? You can buy it. I guess you can buy your other ones as well, can you not?
I don't think the others are there.
You're not, but this book is.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't start writing until after your husband died of I think he had cancer, and you were in your mid to late 60s at that point. I find that so fascinating because most people who have who want to write begin at a much earlier age. Not that 60 something's too old, because I'm in my 60s, but I think you came to a place where you felt like it was time for you to do that, and it kind of helped pull you out of the some of the anxiety of having lost your husband, and some of the things that you had gone through all through your life, your teaching, and all the successes you had while teaching. But tell me a little bit about, and we're kind of getting to the end of our interview, but I want you to talk just a moment about your writing, how it's important to you, why you do it, if you still write, and where you kind of came to that point in life where you wanted to be a writer.
Well, it was first I lost my cat. Our cat was 17 years. Fluffy was like a member of the family. That was like, then when a dog killed her, she sneaked out. Of course, she was sick at the time, and I didn't want to take her to the vets because they would want to put her down, and I guess
More than you could bear.
yeah, more. I didn't want to do that. I just tried to nourish her back to good health, and so one day when I opened the door to let a neighbor out, she sneaked out, and I did not know she was out. And of course, she couldn't. We had declawed her, and I felt guilty about that. So she couldn't get back over the fence, and she patrolled her property, and some stray dog was out there, and I think she tried to chase him, and he did it. He killed her, and that just really hurt. That was when I wrote the first poem about Ode to Fluffy, because it just broke our hearts. I made a scrapbook of her and everything, and I sent this poem to World of Poetry, and I got an honorable mention, and then I went to Anaheim, California, to the Poets Convention, and all these poets from all over the world were there, and we shared our writing and everything, and I saw that I believe I could do this, and that gave me relief. 4 months later, my husband was dying from cancer, and I wrote 2 other poems. I think it was Feelings or something, and that made me feel better. So after he passed, and I began to, when you use, that's my family, my cat and my husband gone, nobody but me. And when I rattled around in a 10-room house and just heard the echoes, and I just screamed out, what can I do? And it seems like the little voice just said, write.
And that's what you did.
And that's what I did.
And you still do it every day, don't you?
I still do it every day.
You showed me a closet full of
my journals.
Journals. They were just literally, I don't know, hundreds.
Yeah.
And you take time every day to write in those about your faith, about your life. Is that correct?
Writing becomes it has become for me a form of therapy. Any type of emotion that I feel, whether it's happiness, thankfulness, praise, fear, joy, and sometimes anger, you get rid of it, or you can express yourself, and it just seems like that it's just there, like I touch a button, and it comes when something bothers me. I remember when they kept telling me I needed to move back home. Jim and Ann, my son and his wife, came and just told me, you need to get out of this big house. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I just need to get through this. And of course, when they left, my daughter-in-law said, you need to get out of here before we have to carry you out. And I was thinking, oh my God, it seems like it just upset me so that I had this headache, and I was thinking, I can't, after they left, I can't have this stroke here by myself. I got in my lounge chair and I looked out the window, and that's when I wrote, it's in there, At the Crossroads of My Life. And it was just like I talked to God, and in the end, he was telling me, you don't have to make a decision right now, because when you get ready, I'm here to help you. My headache left, and I said, I don't have to listen to them when I'm ready to go. And sure enough, two years later, I woke up one morning and I said, I'm out of here.
And you left. I was looking through, again, through your healing thoughts, and I thought we might want to end on a poem that about your life. And there's so many in here that hold a lot of meaning, I'm sure, but I decided that I want you to I think it's particularly apropos to read, if you could, Look Back But No Regrets. And if you'd read that for us, and then we'll conclude our interview right there.
Look back, but no regrets. I guess I was talking to myself. There is no harm to look back. At times, it really helps us to clear our minds. But we must never have regrets about the things we should forget. The past is gone, so let it stay there. Dealing with the present is enough to bear. So don't ever linger on the past too long, or you will find your present going wrong. If we could change the past, it would be great. But that is impossible. It is too late. And if by chance your past doesn't suit you, strive in the present for a better future.
Julia, thank you for being here and for 90 over 90. And I hope you have enjoyed it. And we'll tell you, like I tell everyone else, I'll see you on the internet. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. From Point of Rock Studios.
What is he doing?
He joked.